Here's every Marvel Rivals hero explained in about a minute or less. Adam Warlock shoots one bolt or many bolts. He can tether with nearby teammates to passively heal them and absorb some of their damage. He can heal one friendly hero or himself and have the heal bounce to another nearby hero. If Adam dies, he turns into a ghost, he can fly around and revive somewhere safe. Adam can also respawn his entire team with his ultimate. Dead heroes instantly respawn, and anyone who dies afterwards also respawn on the ultimate location for as long as it's active. Black Panther either claws with his kitty claws or throws a spear at an enemy. Spared enemies receive the mark. If Black Panther uses his dash through enemies that have the mark, then the dash gets the cooldown back. He can also enemies that are close enough. His enemies lets him spawn a big kitty that deals damage to and applies the mark to any of the affected enemies. Black Panther can also run up walls. Pretty cool, huh? Black Widow can either slap with her two big black sticks or shoot with her big sniper rifle. Scoping in with the sniper rifle charges it up and removes any damage fall off, significantly increasing his damage over range. Black Widow can sprint and jump really high when doing so. She can also kick any nearby enemies, throwing them backwards. Upon a successful kick, she can also grapple to any enemy that she wants, not just the one she kicked. Her ultimate turns her first person, where she can charge up a very big explosive projectile that deals a ton of damage. Captain America can punch an enemy twice and then throw his shield 4 times. The shield ricochets to nearby enemies. He can also hold up a shield which deflects incoming damage in a random direction. Just like Widow, he can sprint, but he has no stamina limit. Cap can also jump really high during that sprint, and if he is mid-air, Captain America can slam onto the ground, damaging and knocking up enemies. Cap can also throw his shield on the ground or towards enemies to have it bounce onto the nearest enemy. He can also dash horizontally towards the crosshair. His ultimate gives Captain America and nearby teammates, or the ones in his wake, significant health regen, additional bonus health, and movement speed. Cloak and Dagger can swap between Cloak and Dagger with the press of a button. Cloak's primary fire leads towards the nearest target and heals surrounding allies on hit. Secondary fire creates a healing field on impact. She can fire a small square forward that heals teammates. When she becomes Dagger, then he can beam damage to the enemy closest to the crosshair. Dagger can also go invisible and fly, while making any nearby teammates invisible, untargetable, and giving them a movement speed. Dagger can fire a big square towards enemies that blinds them and makes them take extra damage. Cloak and Dagger's ultimate lets them perform 3 consecutive dashes that leave a trail that damages enemies and heals allies. Doctor Strange fires a burst of slow projectiles which builds his dark energy. He can release the dark energy into a big explosion, dealing more damage the more energy he has accumulated, which is visible under the crosshair. Keep in mind, Doctor Strange cannot be healed if the dark energy reaches 100, so don't let it go that far. Doctor Strange can also fly. He can hold up a big shield that blocks incoming damage. He can create a portal between 2 places that you can see through, shoot through, and even walk through, or whatever you want to. His ultimate stuns surrounding enemies and makes their souls leave their body. Damage dealt to the souls also applies to their bodies, meaning area of effect abilities effectively deal twice the amount of damage. Groot can punch very far. He can also throw bombs that do a big explosion and then they make a bunch of small ones. If he performs a normal melee attack, then the third attack will knock enemies upwards. Groot can also create small walls or big walls. Punching enemies that are close to the walls will make them either take additional damage from the walls or heal Groot and nearby allies for bonus health depending on the wall. Groot's ultimate shoots a projectile that sucks nearby enemies into the center and then snares them for a few seconds. Hawkeye can either shoot 1 large charged arrow or 3 explosive ones that scatter. In addition to charging your arrow up, holding your arrow while aiming it at an enemy fills the bar under your crosshair, which deals more damage the more you build, also known as your focus. He can slash with his katana to knock any enemies in front of him backwards, or use a well-timed melee attack to deflect any incoming projectiles. Hawkeye can also fire a big hypersonic arrow, which deals damage in 2 instances and slows enemies. If you hit a flying hero, then this can actually knock them down. Hawkeye can also perform a double jump, and his ultimate creates a trail of after images of any enemies in range. Shooting the after images deals damage to the enemy heroes as well, and his ultimate also gives him permanent max focus for the entire duration. Hela can either shoot high damage but slow firing hit scan shots against their targets, or charge up a burst of shots that explode after a short while, dealing area of effect damage. The projectile bolts can stick to an enemy, securing more damage for a burst later down the line. Hela can also become an invincible bird and fly in any direction that she points her crosshair. By holding jump jump, she can also slowly glide through the sky. She can throw a ball that briefly stuns enemies on hit, and whenever she lands a kill, the bodies of her victims will explode after a short while, dealing additional damage to anyone around them. Hela's ultimate gives her 1000 health, teleports her into the sky, and lets her throw balls that deal very high amounts of explosive damage, about the same as a full damage headshot. Losing all the health in her ultimate returns Hela to her previous position. Hulk comes in 3 forms. Baby Hulk can shoot a bunny blaster or throw a grenade at the enemies to build energy that can transform him into Hero Hulk. The Hulk can punch any nearby enemies or clap his hands together to send a piercing charged projectile forward. Hulk can also fire a projectile that temporarily stuns an enemy for a few seconds or until they take damage. Holding jump as Hulk lets you charge a huge leap. You can grab onto a wall by holding the jump key when you touch it. He can create a shield around himself and any potentially nearby allies that absorbs damage and charges up for his final form, Monster Hulk. Monster Hulk works the same as the normal Hulk but with increased damage. He also has an ultimate ability which lets him grab the nearest enemy and lock them in a smackdown animation for a total of 5 smacks. Monster Hulk takes less damage during the ultimate. Whenever Hulk runs out of health or dies, he will revert into his prior form until he becomes Baby Hulk, in which case he just dies. Iron Fist channels the power of Kung Fu. Hitting enemies close enough will make you close the gap and dash into them, dealing some damage. As you keep hitting them, your 5th punch will knock them back, and then you can just kind of dash back to them by hitting your primary fire. Your secondary fire lets you block incoming attacks for a short duration, after which you deal significantly more damage for a short amount of time. Punching enemies will recover the block cooldown 1 second per hit. Iron Fist can jump in the air 3 times per jump and run along walls by holding the jump key. He can also perform a longer dash forward, followed with a kick that knocks back nearby enemies. In addition to that, Iron Fist can suspend himself into the air, pop into a meditative stance, healing up normal health and gaining extra bonus health. His ultimate levels all of these abilities up for a longer period of time and significantly lowers the cooldown of his block ability. Iron Man permanently flies, and he can deal a ton of damage either with his primary projectile shots or his secondary big laser beam. Every 3rd shot of the projectile fires 2 projectiles at once. If you think he's flying too slow, then Iron Man can temporarily launch his thrusters and go flying very fast. He can fire missiles to hit nearby targets while mid-flight. Under normal circumstances, he can also power up his suit, which levels up the damage of all of his abilities and allows him to fire the same missiles that I mentioned previously. Iron Man's ultimate charges and fires a big-ass laser blast that deals 1000 damage to any target that it hits, effectively making it a one-shot against any heroes in the game. Now, Jeff is cute. He can either hose his teammates down to heal them or spit loogies at enemies to deal explosive damage. To stay safe, Jeff can also dive under the ground, leaving only his fin exposed. As he is busy chanting the Jaws theme, Jeff can also climb up and along walls. He also has increased movement speed in this form. Jeff can also hold 6 bubbles at a time. After being placed, these bubbles can be stepped on by any ally to quickly give them some healing, a movement speed boost, as well as a healing boost to any incoming heals. Allies who step on the bubbles will knock back any nearby enemies, even just a little bit. Jeff's ultimate lets him dive underground and line the ultimate up before swallowing all the heroes within an area. After swallowing, Jeff stays diving under the ground, dealing damage to the enemies and healing the allies inside of his mouth. Jeff can spit out either all of the enemies or all the teammates at any time, or just jump off the map if he wants to wipe them for free. As for Loki, he can fire his staff to shoot a projectile that, upon explosion, deals damage to enemies or heals allies. He can also go invisible, leaving a clone at his feet. In addition to that clone, Loki can spawn 2 clones at a time. All spawned clones will mimic his shots and shoot at the same targets he does. He can also spawn a defensive rune at his own feet and the feet of all active clones. This rune slowly heals nearby allies and converts all incoming damage into healing. The only way to break the effect is by breaking the runes over their head. Loki can also choose to swap place with one of his clones of choice at any time. Loki's ultimate lets him become any other hero that's currently in the lobby or the game, gaining access to all of their abilities, including a fully charged ultimate. The only abilities he cannot use in this form are their team-up abilities. Luna Slow fires a triple burst of hit-scan ice shards that either deal damage to enemies or heal allies. She can also fire a big ice clump that freezes any enemy hit until it expires after a few seconds or if they take damage. She can change her primary fire to one where she slaps her hands together for a few seconds. The slapping shots go through teammates and enemies in addition to healing Luna every time she fires. Luna can also place a mark over one of her teammates. Marked teammates receive more healing and will passively get healed whenever Luna heals herself or her allies. If she moves for a short duration when out of combat, then Luna will start ice skating. This lets her move faster and jump even higher. Activating Luna Snow's ultimate will make her start playing music. Either she provides insanely strong heal to any teammates around her, or a movement boost. You can seamlessly swap between these modes by hitting the ultimate key again. Magic can swing her big ass sword around, dealing damage to any enemies in range. She can also hold her secondary fire to charge a projectile slash, dealing damage to enemies farther away. A part of Magic's outgoing damage is always converted into bonus health. Magic can briefly phase out of this reality to dodge bullets, and when she comes back, she can either perform a spinning area of effect attack or place a demon that deals melee damage to any nearby enemies. She can also dash in any direction that her crosshair is pointing, and if she hits an enemy, the dash is cut short and they both get launched up into the air. Activating her ultimate turns Magic into Darkchild. Her sword does more damage and adds a bit of damage after each slash. Her sword range is longer and all of her abilities receive buffs. Combining these abilities lets Magic pull off one-shot combos with relative ease, but more on those later. Magneto fires a projectile that explodes on impact after hitting max range. The farther away it travels, the larger the projectile gets. He can also use his stacks, visible under his crosshair, to fire another projectile that deals increasing damage per stack and knocks an enemy back at full stacks. Magneto also has the ability to slowly glide downwards when midair by holding his jump. He can also pull out a shield that blocks all incoming damage and projectiles for a few seconds. It doesn't have any health and won't go down unless interrupted. But wait, there's more. Magneto can also apply a shield to a teammate or himself that absorbs some damage and adds stacks to his knockback ability. After activation, Magneto's ultimate makes him eat all enemy projectiles within range, building a big ball over his head. At any point, you can throw the ball towards an enemy. The more damage your ball has eaten, the more damage the ball does, with astounding damage potential. You can keep track of the ball's progress under your crosshair, but be careful because if it hits 100, the ball will self-destruct. Most of Mantis's kit revolves around life orbs, visible here on your HUD, which you gain by hitting headshots with your primary fire or just over time. Life orb abilities have no cooldowns. Her secondary fire is a targeted heal that heals a little bit and then slowly heals more over time. The instant heal stacks, but the heal over time doesn't. Mantis also has the ability to fire a sleeping spore, which sleeps the first enemy that it hits. Slept enemies can only be woken up if they take enemy damage or if their teammates shoot the Mantis shadow behind them. This does not consume a life orb. Mantis can also consume a life orb to give herself or a teammate a damage boost for a decent amount of time. Mantis will passively heal herself over time whenever she uses an ability that consumes a life orb, and she receives a pretty hefty movement speed boost whenever she doesn't take damage for a few seconds. As for her ultimate, activating this starts an area of effect heal and speed boost that affects both Mantis and nearby teammates, and unlike Luna Snow's ultimate, Mantis can still use all of her abilities and shoot while inside of her ultimate. Moon Knight throws a small moon-shaped thing that bounces between nearby enemies. He can also throw a really big moon thing, which deals a lot more damage but takes a little bit to recharge, and it goes on a cooldown. When using your melee, the third strike will knock the enemy back a little. Moon Knight can also place anks on the floor. Placing an ank near an enemy will knock them up into the air and pull them towards it. Both Moon Knight's primary fire and secondary fire can bounce off of the anks as if they were an enemy. As for movement, Moon Knight has plenty. Not only can he double jump or use a glider, but he also has a grappling hook that can pull him towards the impact point. I found that if you grapple the ground right underneath you, it sort of acts as an instant super jump. Moon Knight's ultimate lets him place an area of effect field where it will rain big hands. The hands deal a lot of damage. You could say that they got hands. Namor can throw a big spear to deal damage against his enemies. His secondary fire lets him charge an even bigger spear that deals even more damage in an area surrounding its impact, but it cannot headshot. Namor can also place squid turrets that attack the nearest enemy. If Namor hits a headshot with his primary fire, then all turrets receive an attack speed buff. Landing a secondary fire big spear will direct all the turrets to fire on the affected enemy. Namor can also enter a safe bubble where he floats up and cannot take any damage for a few seconds. Activating Namor's ultimate lets him spawn a big-ass whale on top of his target area. Enemies within the area will have their movement abilities disabled, and the ones hit by the whale will get stunned and either take one-shot levels of damage if they are within the inner circle of the ultimate, or a ton of damage if they are anywhere outside of it. Penny Parker can shoot her primary fire launcher without ever needing to reload, shooting slow-moving projectiles that deal decent damage. Her secondary fire shoots out a single web, which either stuns an enemy on hit, or deploys a web strand on top of any geometry that can either be used to conceal her mines or grapple towards. The mines work as any other mines in any other game, and after a brief arm time, they will jump up and explode, dealing damage to any nearby enemies. The damage from the mines can stack, so several mines can instantly take out a squishy target. Using the grapple will pull Penny towards her target position and keep her attached afterwards afterwards. If she is still attached to the web and for some reason goes too far away from it, the web will sling her back into it. To avoid this, she can detach at any time. Penny Parker also has the ability to place a bionic spider nest which covers the surrounding area in webs, with spiders running out of the nest to the nearest enemy inside of this large web. You can extend the web to have the spiders run even farther. Penny also has the ability to run up walls by holding space when walking against them. Penny's ultimate speeds her up and gives her additional bonus health, allowing her to perform a spider sweep with a primary fire which knocks up any enemies that she touches. During the ultimate, she also has the ability to deploy more mines more easily. As she runs around, she also leaves a trail of webs. Psylocke's primary shoots bursts of 2 shotgun-ish blasts, with each hit lowering the cooldown of her abilities by 1 second. Her secondary fire throws a burst of shuriken out, and if you hit the secondary fire again, the shurikens will travel from the previous point of impact to wherever you are aiming. Psylocke can dash in any direction that she points, dealing damage to any enemies that she dashes through. It is worth noting that unlike most of her dashes in the game, Psylocke retains some momentum post-dash, and it just feels really smooth, so I wanted to point it out. She can also go fully invisible for a few seconds, receiving a decent movement speed boost during the ability. Taking damage during invisibility temporarily reveals Psylocke out of that invisibility, but she will immediately go invisible again after. Psylocke's ultimate opens an area of effect surrounding her current position, where she randomly dashes between any enemies in range and dealing massive amounts of damage. Rocket Raccoon's gun has 2 firing modes. The primary fire mode is a machine gun, and the secondary fire shoots a healing ball that bounces around, slowing down and healing any allies that it passes by. Rocket can dash in the direction of the crosshair, and he can carry 2 charges of the dash at a time. If he is midair, he can slowly glide by holding the jump key. Rocket can also run up and run alongside walls by holding the jump key while next to him. He can also place a small machine that immediately respawns the next dying teammate right on top of it, assuming you place it preemptively. It also drops an item such as an armor pack, which gives you bonus health, and rocket boots, which lets you jump really high 1 time. Rocket's ultimate places a machine that significantly raises the outgoing damage of any teammates within range and within line of sight. Scarlet Witch's primary fire shoots a continuous beam towards the closest target to her crosshair. It is pretty lax, so you don't need to commit to aiming fully when playing her. You can kind of just close your eyes and get a few kills. Her secondary fire shoots a projectile that explodes on impact. Pretty solid area of effect. 4 charges of the secondary fire at a time, and dealing damage with your primary fire speeds up that recovery. Scarlet Witch can also turn into a ghost, allowing her to fly around while being unable to take damage. Keep in mind that enemies still can see you and follow you. Scarlet Witch can carry 2 charges of her face at a time. She can also hold the jump key while midair to fall more slowly. Scarlet can also throw a ball that explodes a little bit after impact, leaving an area which keeps stunning any enemy that steps inside of it for a very short duration, about every second. Scarlet Witch's ultimate makes her shout really loud while charging up as you free float in any direction that you want, and any enemies within range and line of sight when the ultimate pops get deleted instantly. Spider-Man's primary attack has him hit the nearby enemies with his fist the first 2 times, with the third one being a kick that deals slightly more damage. If the enemy has the mark, then it will take additional damage from his normal attack. His secondary fire shoots out webs that deal damage over range and apply the mark on his targets. Spider-Man can also pull enemies towards him by hitting visibility, but if they have the mark on them when he activates the ability, then he will pull himself towards them and knock them upwards instead. Keep in mind that pulling into an enemy does not consume the mark in favor of your combos. Spider-Man can also perform an uppercut on nearby enemies, knocking them both up and dealing significantly more damage if they have the mark. Spider-Man can also swing his web, and if you haven't changed any settings, it will automatically pick where it attaches and send you towards where you are aiming. Other movement abilities include wall climbing and running on walls. Spider-Man also receives a Spidey Sense warning if any enemies are around. Spider-Man's ultimate instantly gives him bonus health and then starts dealing damage to any enemies that are inside of his radius. The damage applies a stacking slowing effect, meaning they get increasingly slow the longer they stay inside of the ultimate. If an enemy tanks 20 hits from the ultimate, they get stunned. Squirrel Girl's slingshot fires an acorn that explodes on impact with enemies or after one bounce against the environment, dealing damage to any nearby enemies. Her secondary ability lets her throw a massive acorn that rolls around and stops the first enemy it hits from moving. The acorn throw can be charged, which impacts just how fast it moves. Squirrel Girl can use her tail to instantly dash upwards whether she is on the ground or mid-air. She can also eat a big nut to instantly reload her primary fire and give her the ability to use any of her abilities twice. If the ability she wants to use already is on cooldown, then the one she wants to use gets refunded for 1 use. Squirrel Girl's ultimate sends a horde of squirrels running forward, dealing damage to any enemies that they run through along the way. If the squirrels hit an obstacle, then they will bounce off of it and change direction. Star-Lord's primary fire fires very high damage but short-range rapid-fire blasters. Hitting the secondary fire will make him dodge in the direction that he's moving, making him invulnerable during the animation while also reloading his weapons. Star-Lord can keep 2 charges of his dash at a time, so they can be activated one after another. Star-Lord can also pop a flight, which sends him flying in whichever direction the crosshair is pointing. This can be combined both with the dodge, where it resumes the flight after the dodge's animation is finished, and his spinny ability, which deals damage to any targets within the range of Star-Lord. Activating his ultimate lets Star-Lord start flying and gain an aimbot, which out-damages his other abilities, most importantly because the damage fall-off affects him way less during the ultimate, giving him a much better damage effectiveness over the longer ranges. Storm is another flying hero much like Iron Man. Her primary fires wind blades that pierces enemies. Her secondary fire launches a lightning strike which deals damage to any enemies in front of her. Storm is always surrounded by a big storm which either provides a movement boost or a damage boost to her and her teammates. You can easily swap between the 2 storms with the press of a button. The UI always shows which type of storm you have active as well as the amount of allies and enemies within its range. Storm can also level up the power of her storms for a few seconds, in which case the movement storm speeds up teammates even more while slowing enemies, and the damage storm raises the damage of allies even more while also striking enemies with thunder every few seconds. Activating Storm's ultimate lets you decide where you want to land, after which you teleport to the center of your reticle, dealing an insane amount of damage to any nearby enemies. During the ultimate you also gain bonus health to stop you from, dying instantly. The Punisher has a hit scan primary weapon assault rifle without any recoil, but a little bit of bloom. Punisher can swap to his shotgun at any time, dealing a ton of damage, especially against tanks and close range. Both the assault rifle and the shotgun can headshot for insane amounts of damage, with over 280 damage per shot for the shotgun if the enemy is close enough and you hit all headshots. Punisher can fire a smoke grenade that blocks any vision, which also leaps him backwards. The smoke grenade couples very well with his passive that highlights enemies that disappear behind cover for a few seconds. The Punisher can also fire a grappling hook that he either can jump off of or attach to at a later point in time. He can also create a big beefy turret that fires explosive rounds, but unlike the rest of his kit, the turret's bullets are projectiles. The Punisher's ultimate makes him yell really loud before pulling out 2 Gatling guns with an insanely high damage per second. As long as the ult is active, it will also keep firing tracking missiles on any nearby targets in front of you. 4 smacks enemies with his big mallet. Most of his abilities don't have cooldowns, and instead they use 4 Force, visible under his crosshair, to cast. You can recharge 4 Force by smacking enemies with the hammer or casting a thundercloud where you stand. The more enemies hit by the cloud, the more 4 Force you get. 4 can also power up and change his primary attack from throwing a hammer to throwing lightning for a few seconds. 4 can also throw the big hammer, after which it returns to him. The thrown hammer will deal damage to anyone it touches as it returns. He can also dash in the direction of the crosshair. The longer he holds the dash key, the further the dash builds up. Enemies caught in the dash will follow him for the entire duration of the dash. 4's ultimate launches him up in the air, where he floats for a few seconds before slamming down and dealing significant damage once he lands. Venom's primary fire shoots tentacles towards the crosshair. He can also use the same tentacles to attach himself to any enemies within range, slowing them down. If the enemies stay within range for long enough, they take additional damage. Like Spider-Man, Venom can crawl around the walls as well as stand up to start sprinting, but that's not the only thing that they have in common. Venom can also use his web to swing around, but once he is midair, Venom can also slam where he is aiming. Enemies take more damage in the center of the slam, and no matter what, if they are within range, they're going to be knocked up upon hit. But Venom is a lot tankier than Spider-Man. They can also convert the entire amount of their lost health into additional bonus health. Venom's ultimate makes them dive into the ground, making them untargetable until they re-emerge again. Any enemies caught within the big chomp will lose half of their health and take some additional damage. All of the damage dealt from the big chomp is converted into even more bonus health for Venom. Winter Soldier can fire his revolver, which deals a ton of damage per shot but only carries 3 rounds per magazine. The bullets explode on impact, dealing additional damage to anyone who might be behind the target. Every time Winter Soldier uses an ability, then it reloads his weapon and gives him additional bonus health. Bucky can also charge a hook that pulls enemies towards him. The longer you charge it for, the farther the hook goes. He can also dash in the direction of his crosshair, grabbing anyone that gets close enough on the way and then uppercutting them once the dash finishes. He can also send a big ball that deals damage to and pierces through enemies. Winter Soldier's ultimate floats him up into the air and then letting him choose somewhere to slam down. If the enemies fall under 20% health after ultimate damage, then they will instantly die. Landing a kill with his ultimate resets the cooldown. Enemies that can be one-shot by Bucky's ultimate are marked with this icon above their head. Wolverine slashes with his big claws. He can also dash forward, double slashing any enemies in range. Unlike most heroes in the roster, most of the damage Wolverine deals equals to a percentage of the enemy's max health rather than a set amount of damage, with the amount of percent of damage he deals increasing with the amount of rage. So what is rage? Dealing or taking damage builds your rage, which is visible underneath your crosshair. The more rage you have, the more damage your claws deal, and the more heals you get from your second passive, which stops you from dying, and then passively gives you additional bonus health, which eventually transforms into normal health. Logan can also perform a big leap where he is aiming. If he touches an enemy, he will snatch them with him and bring them with for the entirety of the jump. Once Wolverine lands, he will slam the ground for additional damage. Once he lands, Logan's claws slash much faster without a delay per burst. Additionally, he can shout really loud, which significantly reduces incoming damage for the next few seconds. Wolverine's ultimate instantly knocks any enemies in front of him airborne, after which he can decide to slam wherever he is aiming for a devastating percentage of the enemy's max health. But that was all of the heroes, and after hearing about all of them, which one do you think will be your main? I skipped mentioning team-ups to keep this video as light as possible, but there is another more in-depth explain video on the way, which just goes more in-depth with all the details and answers to all the questions that you might have. But if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'm going to be trying to drop a video a day. Banger Marvel Rivals content. Anyways, thanks for watching. Peace out. See ya.